So, just before I finally start the downhill descent into one or two more vocals and then loads of editing and mixing this week in an effort to get box set 2 disc number 1 old songs finished by next weekend. So my vocal mic of choice will be the SE2200T, a slightly posher version, there in its cheap windsock, and unlike the house, which is soundproofed, of course this shed where all the control room is not soundproofed, so that's why most of the recording is done up there in t house, as it were, back garden, and then mixing odds and sods. But as I go, I shall be reviewing voices and vocals for anything that's not recorded all in one go, and I will be redoing them. So that's the last recording to do. Could be as many as 15 tracks on this. I'm shooting for 62 minutes, which is 10 minutes under the optimum size for a CD. I know it's silly to think in terms of a CD when initially this album's coming straight out on download, but there you go. Just old-fashioned me. Lurking there behind is part of my little library. Yes, folks, my child ballads. Even I refer to the child ballads. Jerry McNeese, you'll recognise your old rack of BSS's. There's 10 channels of BSS there, and I've got another 6 channels as well, basically. So they're all wired in splits into the desk. And why, you may ask? That's because not probably with much of what's happening on the first album, because it's all, as we say, within the box, as it were, it's within the computer. When it comes to mixing the band stuff, I'm going to be doing it in a very old-fashioned way, utilising all my fantastic old outboard kit and using this GB4 Soundcraft desk to mix through. So obviously it has the usual basic and quite good parametric EQs, but I don't know, I'm just old-fashioned. I like graphics basically, and these are very, very high quality and they're very quiet. So yeah, 16 channels of that I've got, and I've got not actually in here at the moment, oh god, where are they? I've got 4 channels of Alesis parametric as well. So over 20 channels on the desk. I can put in 20 sets of external EQ on splits, so that'd be fun. Trouble is, in this day and age, of course, when you mix everything in digital, of course, you save it all. What you have to do this time round basically is take photographs of everything, because otherwise, as most people will attest who come from my generation, you won't be able to reproduce anything close to the mix if you need to in the future without doing that. Anyway, some vintage kit there. Look, there's a Bell delay, which is also a brilliant flanger as well. It's a fantastic thing. There's nothing that makes a noise quite like that does. And there's an old Alesis, perfect working order. That's one of show of hands' oldest and first pieces of outboard equipment. Gerard O'Farrell, you'll remember that. It's still working. It's still got some of your user programs in it. Working instruments that are going to be possibly needed in the last minute. There's the Viator 12 string. Very nice. People at the Vintage Company have sponsored me, and they make very fine guitars designed by Paul Brett. Behind it is a cheap little but absolutely wonderful electric. It's a Reverend, and I use it a lot in the studio. It's such a versatile little guitar. Behind it, the most expensive guitar here is the Godin, and that's both a MIDI guitar controller. It also has a magnetic pickup and a bridge pickup as well. It's just one of the most useful things you can have. And then Lucas Drinkwater, if he sees this, will recognise one of his old basses lurking behind there. It's about to have a lot of use, Lucas. It's a nice little bass. Yep. Okay, it's the GB4. And when it comes to mixing a lot of the live band stuff, which is still a little bit down the line yet, it will be done through this desk in a very, very analog way. Unfortunately, my Yamaha Rev 7 has finally died, and that's rather sad. So if anyone out there has a Rev 7 they don't want, I'd like it, please, as long as it's working. Why Rev 7, they all say, with all these wonderful things you can have. I'm not telling you, there is just a reason, that's all. Okay, oh look, reference book. Yeah, you see, even I can read. Here you go, Great American Folk Songs, Best Loved American Folk Songs, John and Alan Lomax. It's a great compilation, and there will certainly be one song on this album. I've recorded two songs, songs that I knew anyway, but I've kind of tidied them by referring to this book, which has only just come into my hands. And yep, there'll be something from that anyway. Moving on round, yeah, there's an 11 rack. It gets dragged out once in a while. I'm not actually the biggest fan of it, but it's useful sometimes. And then down there, if I want to reamp any guitars, there's another shed next to here. I might put a big amp in there and reamp through that, or this little Epiphone practice amp actually is very good for reamping, and that's why that microphone's hanging there, because that just swings down and so on. Anyway, and then the main rig, a couple of Macs hiding under there, a couple of Acer screens, inputting keyboard, and then two interfaces. That's the one with multiple outputs, and that's the EFI, which is a great interface, folks. I do have to say, it wasn't even recommended to me. I bought it on, literally, I like the look of it, and I bought it, and it's proved to be very useful. Then there's the trusty old Mbox Pro there. It's temperamental, but works most of the time, and it's pretty brilliant. I wouldn't keep anything like this if I was a professional recording engineer, but I'm simply not. So, you know, I just mostly do my own work, or very carefully selected production jobs. So, but yeah, the Mbox, as long as it decides to work, it has off days, basically. That's all I can say. Moving around, monitors. Okay, so these old Fosdexes, you know what, I bought these when Jim Morey was upgrading. I had his old Fosdexes here, and I know what I'd like to replace them, but so far I've never been inclined to replace them until I've actually got enough money to buy the things that I want. There's a KRK sub down there. I've got the balance pretty much right between these, without analysis, I have to say. And the sound in the room works pretty well, you know. Just got to be careful. Obviously there's so much shit in here, it's not a proper studio, it's just a shed at the end of the day, so things rattle if you turn things up too loud, so that is another limiting factor, which is actually a bloody good thing. So there. Then there's a pile of stuff there. There's a pile of stuff there that's not wired at the moment. Lots of bits and pieces. There's a Matisse Electronics unit there with loads and loads of interesting software in it. I don't invoke it very much, but it may well come into play. And then immediately, what is in use? Up the top there, yes folks, it's the old Physical Antares auto tuner. But I don't use it for auto tuning. It's just got some of the best physical mic modelers in it that I've ever come across. Mick Dolan had one of these in his rack, and he often looked at the modelers just to see what. Often, you know, taking live sound off at SM58 or something like that, and just wanting to, you know, add a touch of sparkle or something like that. And so that's what I use it for. I haven't used it as an auto tuner for years. Then my mic preamps is the ART single channel. That's what that SE microphone is plugged into. So that's what will happen. Simple as that. 4 channels of ART. Four channels of TLA. Good old TLA 4-channel Ivory, Patch Bay, working my way down, and then there's this curious SM EP84, which is yeah, it's a good piece of gear. Don't know what I can say about it really. Underneath that is an Alesis HD 24, which isn't in use at the moment, but sometimes it can be very handy just to have a straight sort of giant capacity 24 track hard disk machine. It's very simple to use, and that will of course be loomed into the desk, which it isn't at the moment. And there's the old Tascam CD read writer, and the even more ancient but serviceable Fosdex DAT machine, which is very handy. Working one's way around. It's my famous clock, doesn't tell the time. Keyboards in here. There's a Roland Rode piano. It's a great little piano. It's the RD84. And then there's the good old Korg Z1. Welcome to the 80s. Bought that from Rex Preston, would you believe, of all people, when he used it in college. Everything goes very 80s the moment you plug it in. It's very funny. And then my first ever studio keyboard for years was the little JV30, the Roland here, which is actually fantastic. Very, very useful piece of kit. And there's GR20, Roland GR20 guitar synth, and obviously interface. I don't tend to use anything that's in the GR20, but of course it's the plug through into the system for accessing all kinds of other sounds. That's about it really. Oh, some interesting curios. Need to say, Behringer, I know they've been objects of derision in the past, but that's 130 quid for this ADA interface, 8 channels, and it's fantastic. I really can't fault it or knock it in any way, so I'm not going to. So I've had some very dodgy Behringer gear in the past, but I have to say this is an excellent little piece of kit. And there's a hole there where some of that other stuff back there will be going in, whilst I'm doing some rendering tomorrow probably. And there's the ancient ex-BBC Clark Techniques there, which unfortunately needs a new power supply, but I shall get that fixed soon. I don't need it for this week, but it will be very handy. It's probably the best external reverb unit I've got. And then some real curios down there, Roland Depth 3. The Depth 3 is just one of those curious pieces of machinery. There's no gated reverb quite like it for some reason, or I've never been able to reproduce it. Maybe that's just my inability. Who knows? I don't know. And finally, yes folks, even I've got a vacuum cleaner.